Hey, what is up, everybody? Welcome to the Restoration Rundown podcast, the podcast that's dedicated to you, the restoration business owner, if that's who's listening to it today. I'm very excited to be back here. It's been a little while. We've had a lot of changes here at Ironclad Restoration Marketing and me personally, including welcoming a little baby. But what better way to kick off this little bit of a break and bring on some old friends of mine, Chris and Brandon from the Floodlight Group, Floodlight Consulting Group. Oh, look at that. Your name's even on the bottom to help me out. Guys, what's going on?
What's up, bro? Dude, new baby.
Holy cow. Yep. A new one. I
really
did trade the old one in. I still have him too, but
you didn't know trade-ins, huh?
Nah, they don't do that very, very nicely down here. No, but yeah, we're a month into having an infinite home and moving offices and changing a lot here at the business. So it's really refreshing to be able to bring on some buddies that I've learned so much from and are gracious enough with your time to join me here and spend your time, talking shop a little bit. And you guys are just so busy. I think I have a feeling that anywhere I fly in the United States, I'm going to running into somebody from your company or one of you guys. I just saw Chris in Austin and got a chance to sit through his presentation there at this marketing summit. And it's really cool to be able to have you guys on now in one spot.
Right on, brother. Yeah, it's good to hang out, man. It's been a hot minute since we've had some time to slow down long enough to have a convo. So this is cool.
Yeah. So since it's been a hot minute, I wanted to, before we get diving into, the day here, why don't you go ahead and introduce yourselves again to any new people that have been listening or may have missed it. It's been a little while since you've been on. Introduce yourself and your business and kind of what you guys are all about, because I think that you guys provide so much value out there that if people don't know who you are, they're really missing out.
Cool, man. Go ahead.
Chris. So Floodlight Consulting Group is a full service business consulting company in the restoration industry. We specialize in restoration. It's all we do. All of our consultants have deep operational leadership and or ownership background. So we really specialize in coming alongside restorers and helping them reach their objectives, which for some people is selling their company to a private equity or transitioning their company to children or key employees of the business. And for some, it's just dialing in their business to where they have a business that they love to run and operate. And so everything from field operations and leadership and HR to sales and marketing, all of that stuff. We kind of think of ourselves as a battle buddy to help our entrepreneur clients excel and take their business wherever they want it to go.
Yeah. And then in addition to that, of course, we run the Head, Heart, and Boots podcast. That's a big passion project for Chris and I, and it's our space where we just get to explore some, those other aspects of us as leaders and entrepreneurs and business owners. And we just kind of, no one has to be forced to listen to it. And so we can kind of just run down whatever path we feel like is relevant in the moment or relevant in terms of where we're at in our own personal business. And I think people get a lot of value of just kind of hanging out in those conversations and saying, man, I can relate to that. I'm not alone. And so we really enjoy that project as well.
It's probably for us as much as it is for everybody in restoration.
I would say that. I can relate to that quite well, guys. And you guys really walk this line of just, you guys provide so much value in what you do. And you're kind of a disruptor in a sense too, because everybody's known who you are. You guys are all over the place. I've had the pleasure of sitting through a couple of your presentations, your on-site, your TED Talks, if you will. And man, just the stuff that you guys are willing to share without having a client in there is really cool. And it's really nice to be able to kind of bounce ideas off guys like you. And I'm very fortunate to be able to be in your circle of people that we get to see each other every once in a while.
Thanks, brother. We feel the same, man.
Yeah, that's really kind, man. Thanks.
Yeah. All right. So now that we got the lion out of the way here, let's get into it. No, guys. No. So I appreciate it. So everybody, if you don't check them out, Floodlight Consulting Group. So I want to talk to you guys about something that's really important here. And it kind of falls into what we all kind of do in a sense, a part of what we do here. And that's kind of giving information away, right? We're teaching, we're providing data. And in that vein, I wanted to talk to you guys a little bit from the digital marketing side. Data is crucial to have, right? If you're not tracking X, Y, and Z, then you really don't know what you're doing with your money. And from your side, everything that you've done, data is so important to kind of digest. And I wanted to break it down a little bit more and talk to you guys about from your end, what kind of data you guys are helping people kind of digest and aggregate that'll help them increase their sales. And I want to kind of throw in every once in a while on my end what we're seeing from a digital marketing side to maybe help the audience out there kind of turn on a light in their head and say, here's some things that we can action and implement right now that are going to help our bottom line out. Because at the end of the day, that's what really matters, right?
Yeah, for sure, man. Yeah.
Yeah. I can set a little bit of a frame for that just to get us
Yeah.
started. The way that we, in terms of like metrics or KPIs
Mhm.
or core metrics that we teach our clients to follow, when it comes to sales, we really kind of branch off between two tracks. So we
Yeah.
have what we think of as operational sales and then direct sales, right? Direct sales is what most of us would tend to think of when it comes to route marketers or route salespeople, people, chasing after insurance agent relationships, plumber relationships, and so forth, as well as your direct commercial salespeople, right? They're going out there turning over rocks, trying to establish relationships with chief engineers, facility managers, property managers, et cetera.
Yeah.
So that's what we think of as the direct selling side. On the operational selling side, within our Floodlight system, we have what we call every job sales activities that are part of these are moments in the customer experience where there's essentially an opportunity for us to win that customer over, because that's an ongoing process with commercial
Yeah,
clients. Every job we have to continue winning them over, right? But then there's these moments in the timeline where there's an opportunity for us to earn or generate another opportunity, whether it be asking for referrals or reaching out to the agent of record on that job. There's a cadence of internal sales behaviors that we teach teams to integrate that help us prioritize our conversion rate when we respond to that first notice of loss, is one of those key moments of truth, as well as the handoff between MIT and recon to capture the secondary opportunity with that existing job. And so that, first of all, that's just kind of first high pass on how we think about sales. What would you add to that?
Well, I think, and we won't go into this for a long period of time, but I think just kind of summarizing like what you said, Ben, in terms of like data, right? So our opinion, right, is that we try to break that into kind of like three categories almost. The first is what we would probably call like a core metric, or a lot of organizations would say KPI. But these are the non-role specifics. This is the global stuff, right? So this is where we key in on rev versus a rev goal, our gross profit margins, our AR aging accountability. And then the big one, and I think it's really for today's topic, is that closing and conversion rate. We're just pretty surprised how often teams aren't measuring that, but they want to hire more salespeople and they want to spend on marketing and they want to do all these things, but they don't know our capture rate. So anyways, we look at like the big global stuff. That's what unifies us as a leadership team. And then that second tier is more around those individual standards. So that for us is more like a KPI. So it's those performance deliverables based on job title and role. And then the kind of like the down in the weeds. And this is interesting to see how this sits with you, but we look at what we actually manage is leading activities and behaviors, right? Mm-hmm. So it's like, what can we do in our systems and processes to create behaviors and activities that will give us these trailing measures that we're ultimately going to be paying attention to? And we try to spend as much leadership competency and energy deploying against those, right? And that's the everyday stuff. It's the everyday touches, the coaching, the inspecting that we're doing. We try to hover around those leading activities and behaviors. So there you go. There's our high level pass. Yeah.
No, I love it, and it's exactly you've both of you have touched on something where we all kind of discussed. We want to head in the direction of figuring out how to convert, how important and kind of conveying how important conversions are across the board for your business. And I'd love to dive into how the systems and operations play into this. And so from a digital marketing side, I always say it, traffic costs a lot of money. And from what you're talking about, trying to drum up the commercial sales and knocking on doors, that costs a lot of money too. You have payroll that has to be accounted for. You have time. And if that's not bearing fruit, then you're wasting even more money. Every time you turn the key, pick up a phone, send an email is costing you money. And what I think a lot of business owners miss on, and a lot of people do, and you hit the nail on the head, is it's most of the time they want to increase the amount of touch points. They want to increase the amount of people they're reaching out to, versus trying to capitalize on the people that they are reaching out to. So how that merges with a digital marketing age is, SEO. We'll keep it in the simplest terms. If we're sending 100 people a month to a website through organic search and they're getting one phone call, Most business owners in this space and a lot of the home services, their immediate gut reaction, emotional reaction is saying, well, our digital marketing agency sucks. We're not getting any calls. We need to switch gears, right? And then they go to the next guy and they maybe increase their traffic by like 15 because they've moved another keyword up to page 1 or they've done something different. But they're still only getting 1 or 2 calls, right? So they've spent an extra $1,000 a month on getting an extra 15 people to look at their website and got 1 extra call. Well, if they would have just made XYZ changes on their website, maybe the flow is off, maybe their logo sucks, maybe they don't have the right information, their site is slow, doing free things to increase your conversions is going to make you a lot more money without having to spend a dime. Right. So we are constantly in a battle with clients and just with the world trying to figure out ways to increase conversions on digital marketing. And it behooves the owners to kind of pay attention to this stuff. So I'd be interested to kind of hear if you guys have any insight into that on your sales side, what you're talking with people when you're dealing with situations like that, when it just comes to the knocking on the doors or trying to drum up the commercial sales.
Yeah, for sure. I think let me kind of touch on like the measurable, and then I think it'll be a segue for. So here's a common conversation is, when we're talking to teams, the idea is normally there's some top line number and some ultimate EBITDA or net profit number that they've got their eye on, right?
Yeah.
And so we ultimately always get kind of tapped on the shoulder for, okay, help me sell more, which we're happy to do, love it. But one of the first things that we're normally going to do is ask that prospect or that client, do you know what your closing and your conversion rates are? And just for the sake of definition, when we say closing, that means if I get a call, can I secure it?
Yes.
Conversion is that we've done EMS. Can I turn that into content, recon, fire, whatever, those other auxiliary services? Can we maximize that opportunity? And what's really crazy, and I'm not saying this disparagingly, it just happens, is that it's often a number we don't have our eye on. And so we don't understand the implications of the opportunity cost associated with that. And so there's a couple things that we try to do with folks is like an example. And these are all just, these are back of the napkin math, right?
Yeah.
But it's like, if you look at your average recon job as an example, it's pretty commonly somewhere 2 or 3 to 1 compared to your EMS. So if we look at someone's overall revenue, let's say, and they're doing a couple million in mitigation, but their overall revenue for the company is only 4 million. Our question is, well, let's think about what's happening on the conversion side, because we could pretty easily be running at least 2, if not 3 or 4 to 1 on this recon side as well. So if it's a $2 million operation, they could easily be at 6+ million in total rev because of these combined opportunities. And so anyways, my point of that is that it's really common for us to ask some key questions with folks and for them to identify there's literally at times millions, if not tens of millions of dollars that really could be categorized as low-hanging fruit, right? This is stuff I could change tomorrow, whereas kind of like your reference, lead gen, it's a legacy. It takes time. You build the pipeline. But then it's this SEO activity for you that's more of the immediate result, right? And I think for us, it's similar in the sense of we can generate all these leads by extending our sales force, adding salespeople, but it takes months to develop a relationship where we can tweak some things in our operation tomorrow and gain more money. And so it's like this. Anyways, I'm kind of getting off on a tangent, but so that key conversion is like, are you measuring it? And do you have some baseline assessment of the value of your average job size? And then if that was to convert to recon example, what kind of revenue is that representing? And then what are you doing in your systems and process to close that gap, right?
Yeah, one of the metrics we actually stumbled on as we were talking with an independent restorer in California, this is a couple of years ago, the way they looked at it, they look at what is the total value of an inbound lead when the phone rings. Not just thinking about in terms of what our average job size is for MIT, but what is the total bundled full potential value of an inbound call if we are able to capture all of the water, all of the contents, all of the recon value in our average job. What's that number? And I think that's a really healthy number for people to track on. Certainly understanding their conversion rate on that initial FNOL,
Yeah.
And then conversion to the recon, capturing those things. That's all really valuable too. But I think the bigger picture is what's so attractive is, man, what if we had a process that would help us capture all the opportunity and we stopped thinking about it as just getting the job, which I think is where a lot of restorers stop, is how do we collect that work authorization? And then, well, if we get recon, it's kind of gravy, it's kind of bonus. And instead really thinking holistically and say, how do we maximize the value of that one relationship?
Right.
And the multiplier on the business is just
Huge.
like extraordinary, So
Yeah, that's really great insight. And for people, I'd want to just not confuse things, because I really like how you guys are talking about you guys differentiate closing the job versus the conversion. And from my end, we're just, so people are very clear, we when we talk about conversions and as we get into the digital marketing, we're only surface level of what you guys are talking about. We're talking about a phone call coming in and converting that into a job that you're going to do.
revenue.
But I love that insight about how we can capitalize, because they do kind of work exactly hand in hand, how you can capitalize on everything. So even if you're just get a mold call, how am I going to do the recon? How am I going to do the MIT? How am I going to do, if there's flooding, typically there's going to be water where there's mold, or at some point there was. So I just wanted to differentiate and clarify that. So when we do go and people are kind of drinking through a fire hose, like they tend to do when I talk, that they know exactly where we're all coming from with this. And I have a feeling this is going to tie perfectly together like a bow.
Well,
as per usual.
I should add a disclaimer too, because it's almost guaranteed that throughout our conversation, I'm going to interchangeably use closing and conversion randomly. And so
it could mean, everybody listen, it could mean either. So just listen to the substance, and you know what it's going to do? It's going to force people to pay attention a little bit more. There's a good chance they're driving or doing something where they want to kill some time and listening. So just pay attention a little bit more to make sure that you understand the context in our words. It's the substance that matters, not what we're saying. Right.
That's right on, dude. Love that. I got to remember that for myself.
Back for to come back to something you mentioned here, when it comes to these issues, right? So we're going, you guys are stepping into a company, we're talking to them, they're having some issues and they're having a hard time capitalizing on these other opportunities that are coming through. And I know, Chris, in your talk in the summit in Austin, one of the cool things I liked hearing about, which goes into that, was the walkthrough part, where you can get in with a property manager, walk through the project, you kind of get to know them a little bit, and you start laying that groundwork to build your garden. And when I mean build a garden, meaning it takes a very long time to build a garden. You still have to invest your time, you have to invest resources, it's going to cost money. And it takes a long time to build a garden, but there's other ways to go to the grocery store while you're waiting for that garden to grow, right? So we try to separate those two things. And from my perspective, it's SEO and Google Ads, right? SEO is the garden you're building and building a portfolio. And Google Ads is like going to the grocery store if they're done right. From your end, what do you think are, if you can identify a couple of the main causes that people are just missing that? Because you're telling me like this, I don't own a restoration business. I have a bigger commercial construction company. So the way we get jobs is completely different. So, but it made so much sense, right? It seems like, well, yeah, duh. Why wouldn't we want to get everything? It's such a grind to get that phone call in the first place or build that relationship. Why do you think, and maybe you can identify some key reasons that people are just missing that right now?
Yeah, for sure.
Well, yeah, I think the struggle points, right? Some of the reasons why we fail to close an inbound job, and why we fail to, there's so many factors, but the most common ones we see is, I think in general, as an industry, we tend to be fairly transactional and very technical in our orientation. So there's a really strong pull that I think most of us feel like, whoo, we got a live one. Let's do our technical stuff, help them out. Like, it's all motivated from a really solid place of wanting to provide great service experience, But I think we tend to be a little bit over-oriented around the technical aspects of what we do and not quite customer-focused enough. So we tend to dive right into the technical. Let me explain what I'm going to do for you and why it's important, before we understand what the customer's needs, fears, concerns, and anxieties are around what just happened, which is part of the uniqueness of our industry, right? It's like if I owned a residential remodeling business, dang near every person that calls me and wants to talk is happy and excited and has a vision for something they want to do to their home, right? Or their space. They're motivated. They've been saving. They're capitalized for that project. Whereas, of course, all of our restoration clients, including commercial ones, which we often forget, are in some state of emotional distress.
Yes.
A little bit or a lot.
Right.
And so I think that's one of the biggest things we miss, and sometimes has a direct effect on whether or not we get that job, is that we can kind of tend to run right past the customer without identifying what they really care about and are concerned about in that moment.
Mm.
So I think that relates in our initial response to a homeowner, Mrs. Jones, or to Sam, the chief engineer that we're responding to initially. I think one of the critical questions that we teach from this operational selling perspective, because when we get an inbound job, part of our Floodlight model, and I think something that's a little bit different maybe about our industry than others, is I'm not sending a direct sales rep out to close that water mitt lead, right? We're sending a technician, a crew chief, in most people's businesses out there, and they're both the service person and, quote, the salesperson collecting that work authorization, right? And so one of the things we coach them with is to have some initial discovery with the customer before we just go in. Ask them a question, for example, of, hey, Mrs. Jones, before I kind of launch into our process and explaining things and so forth, is there anything in the home or about this situation that gives you particular concern, right, or anxiety? Whether that's maybe a personal item or something, that holds a lot of sentimental value, right, that's underwater in the basement that they're freaked out about, they're sad about, or it's maybe they have a child who's homeschooled, and there's going to be a child in the home, and they're like, I don't know how this is going to work, with you guys bringing all your stuff in here, and how is this going to happen? And there's anxiety in that respect. But when we get really good at zeroing in on the customer, it sets the stage for us collecting that work. It's a major item in establishing that customer's trust, so that when we do ask them to sign the work authorization, it's kind of a non-issue, a moot point, because we've gained their trust. Likewise with commercial, the same thing applies, right? If we just rush right into, here's what I'm going to do, here's what comes next, and we don't ever check in with the customer, we a lot of times fail to get that buy-in. And then that can sometimes lead to a think it over, to I need to talk to my counterparts, to now all of a sudden we're sitting on a water loss. And of course, we all know the bad things that happens when we sit and there's foot dragging. It's often because we just didn't establish that customer focus, and they didn't feel like they could trust us with the next steps. So I think that's a critical issue that as an industry, we often just brush right past. And then we find ourselves with, in the commercial side in particular, a competitor coming in, applying a customer focus. Hey, has anybody explained the process to you? No. Okay, well, let me walk you through you know what I mean? Let me ask you some good questions. And then they take it based on their customer focus.
That was my gig. That's how I won stuff.
Oh, dude, you stole business all the time.
All the time.
Awesome.
I'd steal it over the phone. Like I wouldn't even have it on site. I mean, I'm talking like I was big business, but I'm just saying it was a pretty common occurrence that you could close it over the phone if you were just willing to provide some guidance. I think to kind of parallel what Chris is saying, here's where, like, if we boiled it down to these moments in the client life cycle, like where we often lose the conversion, the conversion is, one is we don't tell them we are actually there to take care of the entire thing. And that sounds like, I think some people listening are going, wait, yeah, we do. Okay. Do you? Or is this assumptive, right? Are we operating from the posture that we know we can take care of the whole thing? Or have we provided them a service map that shows that we will take care of the whole thing? So we create an understanding gap, and that understanding gap forces the client to go try to solve that problem on their own. So we lose them. I think the other hiccup that we run into is that we lose them at what we call the silent phase. It's that position where I've gone out. Maybe I even responded very quickly. I'm now negotiating with the carrier on the scope, and my client really doesn't know what the hell's going on. So they went from 5 days of, we've got colorful terms for it, but there's a lot of movement. Let's put it that way. And now you and I are negotiating behind the scenes on their behalf.
And nothing's happening.
They can't.
So there's a perceived indifference. You're right.
Yeah, they're again. It's an understanding gap. They're left to fill in the blanks. Now they're talking to the brothers, the uncles, the neighbor, the person, right? And they're starting to identify, I have a need, even though they probably don't. But it was just, we didn't tell them, we didn't guide them, we didn't let them know what was going on. And then I think a third one that's really common is we are so dialed in on time is of the essence for the mitigation. But then when it comes time to respond accordingly for the recon, we just have this kind of, well, we'll take a look at it when the work's done. We'll look at it when demo's complete and the project's dry. And we're just creating all these opportunities for those air gaps to exist. And the client, again, is forced to go make a decision. And unfortunately, they're not considering us because we didn't confirm with them that we are the answer.
Right.
So I think those are the hot spots. We don't know their unspoken needs. We're not using time is of the essence in regard to getting our scope and negotiating what needs to happen for recon. And then I think the third one is we just leave these expectation gaps and we allow them or force them to go solve their own problem, which accidentally pushes us out of the relationship triangle. You know what I mean?
I got one more. I got one more that's like, maybe it's the biggest with respect to what we're talking about. And that is, I think in general, as an industry, we do not take our call intake seriously. You know, Brandon and I've had
I can attest to that as well. When
you can conversion, yeah.
Oh yeah.
I'll bet you can. You know, Brandon and I just anecdotally over the years, we've talked about this a lot, that the receptionist position in a restoration company is often one of the most distant afterthoughts. It's like, well, we know we need somebody, quote, answering phones.
Right.
But oftentimes we don't, we do very little training and equipping and development of that role, even though it might be the most consequential role in terms of our business growth and our sales and our revenue, right? It's the top of the funnel. It's the very first interaction somebody has oftentimes with our brand. Yes. And we often will put a $15 an hour inexperienced person. We consider it an entry-level role rather than an income-producing role. Yeah. Is how we tend to think about it. And here's the other thing too, that's just an operational gap, is that what happens when you're full-time receptionist, which is an important investment that even many companies don't make. They just sort of round robin call reception, which is probably even worse. But what happens when your full-time receptionist goes to lunch? Who gets that call? Is it a random phone tree? Was just like that PM or that mitigation manager or that AR person answers the phone. Hello, XYZ Restoration. This is Bonnie. Oh, you have a job? And then they're like, oh, hold on a minute, and then they're finding the right input screen, and they may or may not take them through the same intake process as the normal receptionist. And then a data point gets left off, and then we have to call them back because we forgot to ask for their address. That initial call intake is so incredibly powerful. And of course, the worst case scenario of all is it goes to voicemail. And I actually really like, periodically, it's not every day, because so often we're talking to our clients on cell phones and so forth. But whenever I have the opportunity, I like to call the front desk of our clients' companies to track them down. I got to tell you, probably 50% of the time when I randomly call as just they don't know me from Adam in terms of the phone ringing, I get voicemail.
Yeah, not good.
Not good at all. And this is universal. I mean, we've got dozens and dozens of clients all over the country. Now, there's exceptions to all of that. And I would say, most companies are in some state of dialing in and improving their call and take process. We obviously, one of our sponsors on our show is answerforce.com. We really like Mandy and the team there. They're presenting a really inexpensive, redundant solution and accessory that I think companies can very easily add to their call and take process to make sure that they're not missing calls and the call intake is consistent. But I think that's probably one of the biggest glaring issues in a resto company relative to this conversion issue. Yeah. Sounds like you see that too, just in terms of the data you're observing. And
oh yeah, it's not only from the restoration marketing side, but I had a generalist agency for a few years before we just focused on the restoration industry, and it's rampant. It's even gotten to the point. I'll share a little bit of a story. We had a troubled client. They're the typical issues where their processes are all over the place. There's no consistency with anything that they do in house, and they bounced around quite a bit. Spent a lot of money and ended up with us. And we turned things around as far as from a digital aesthetic, from the rankings, from visual, from calls coming in, and we're spent a few months with some pretty hard meetings when our monthly marketing meetings, and having this business owner, very intelligent person, been down the road, and tell us that we're not getting any calls. This is not working. Whatever you're doing isn't working. And all we're doing on our end is pulling our hair out, looking at these incredible amounts of traffic conversions, impressions on their ads, and great spends. And we're just killing ourselves trying to figure out what's going on with the client. I remember sitting in a meeting with a couple of my team members here at Ironclad, and we're with this client, and they said, they made a really snarky, smart ass response to something that we said, like, listen, your traffic, like, we've increased it month over month by like 10%, 20% last month. This month is 40% increase. What's going on? They go, well, I'm sitting here in a meeting and this is business hours. And have you heard my phone ring? And one of us, and I can't remember if it was myself or maybe JC, pulled our phone out on the side and called their office and picked up the phone on speakerphone because we were so confident. I think that just the light came on and it went to voicemail instantly without ringing, and said, our office, you've reached us outside of business hours. We are currently closed. Please call back during our normal business hours, Monday through Friday, at whatever time it was. And this business owner's face turned ghost white and was like, oh, well, there must be something wrong with my answering service. So a lot of times, and I do want to dive quite a bit into this, especially because you guys are partnering with somebody that has a call center, because I have a whole list of concerns with call centers in respect to restoration. But it sounds like a lot of this, and Chris, your presentation in Austin recently, and a huge part of one of the ones that I share, is kind of trying to figure out who it is that you want to do business with, right? If you can't figure out who it is that you want to do business with, you're going to have a hell of a time converting and marketing to them, right? Well, not only just marketing to them, but now from your perspective, converting to them. So I don't think we can overstate the importance of really diving into who it is that you want to do business with, because talking about addressing fears and pain points and concerns, well, a property manager or a hotel manager or somebody that's in facilities is going to have vastly different concerns than a mother or a father that's got some sort of loss in their home, right? One thing that stuck out to me that you talked about is that PTSD. The one thing you can address as a restoration company is understanding that as a property manager, whatever the role they are on the commercial side, they may have had a horrible experience with somebody that was completely outside of maybe the scope, and it just drove them nuts, and they've hired you on and you've kicked ass from day one, but all of a sudden something happened, where you have that client that, like, if you're not responding to an email within 45 minutes, it's just scorched earth on you and that's it, and you're dead. I do want to dive into that a little bit, because I think that's a really important, well, I don't not only think, but I know that it's a really important aspect of everything you need to be doing with your restoration business or business in general. Can you guys speak to that a little bit more? Really, maybe on both sides a little bit, some things that we can just turn some light bulbs on this episode without getting crazy and spending 5 hours talking about it, which I know that we all can. That's how important it is. But is there anything that you guys can share in respect to that, to help beat in what I've been talking about for a while, is understanding who Joe is, so you can sell to Joe?
Yeah. I mean, I'm going to steal Chris's airspace. This is really his push, right? Chris is very adamant about discussing the priority of learning our client and becoming a student of the client. And so, when Chris is teaching any kind of like live 2-day course or working with sales team, he's really trying to drive home this idea of understanding restoration has some value, and some should be all capital and underlined. But the real value, if you're going to be what Chris would deem a peer partner, meaning you're not in a transactional relationship, but you're seen as a guide or a steward to help your client prospect be more successful in their position and their lane, we got to understand what in the hell is even important to them. Like, why do they care about the kind of friction points in a claim process? What's important to them? Well, you don't know that if you don't understand their business, their decision-making, where they fit in the hierarchy, the chain of command, what their performance is judged on. And so again, I think we just go back and we say, I'm affirming what you're saying, Ben. And how do we do that tactically? Hey, listen, you have operational figures in your business that know the trade craft of providing disaster restoration services. That's their job.
Yep.
If you're a sales or marketing centered individual on the roster. It's your job to know your client. And you're the liaison between the client and us as the service provider. You're the one that is interpreting the need of the client because you're a student of them, and you're leaning on your operational team to be the disaster specialist to provide the service and deliver on the promise. And that's why that partnership is so freaking important. So, like, do we think salespeople need to go to umpteen hours and get certs? Honestly, no, I don't really care. But what I want you to speak the same language as your senior living community leaders.
That's right.
So that you can tell us how they're thinking, so that we can deliver a service that meets their demand. Right.
Yeah. And I think, kind of speaking to that original bit that you brought up in terms of how, if we fail to do that discovery, and figure out that intel and understanding their business, understanding their so we tend to coach not just salespeople, right? And this is the other thing I think that is true of really any service business, but in particular ours, is that discovery of our client, learning about them, their past experience, their team, et cetera, is really important across the entire customer experience chain. And when you're doing commercial, it's forever. Like, ideally, we want that property manager to be sending us business for the rest of their career, right? I want that hotel GM, no matter what hotel they're managing, I want them sending them their business for the rest of their life, right? I mean, that's ultimately what we're trying to create with commercial. And so part of that discovery, we actually did a keynote around this because I think it's a universal principle, is that all of us have experiences. We have experiences in our marriage. We have experiences as parents. We have experiences as business owners. We have experiences with vendors, good experiences, bad experiences. And every time we have an experience as a human, psychologically, we're creating essentially a file folder around that experience, right? This positive thing happened, and then all of the little bits associated with it that made it positive. Well, likewise, our customers, when they have prior negative experiences with restoration companies or other construction, people, whatever, if we don't do some due diligence to understand what their past experience has been with damage events, water situations, other emergencies and stuff they've dealt with on their property, what can happen is that when we get into our process with them, we might say or do a thing that triggers them pulling that past file folder and associating what we just said or did with this hyper negative thing they experienced from a different company in the past. And it's more of just a reaction. All of us do this. We do this in our marriage. We do this in our parenting. We do this in our business with our employees, right? But when it comes to sales, if we don't find a way, and also teach and coach our team, our people. Now, this is not just a salesperson thing. This is a project manager skill. This is an estimator skill. This is an AR collection. This is an important skill for business people in a service industry. I need to do whatever I can to know and understand my client's past experience, so then I can modulate our service delivery to proactively address those things and watch out for those things, right? So that we don't have sort of a hand grenade blow up in the middle of the thing unexpectedly because they hear one of our project managers say X. Oh, and they say, I know what's going on here. This is just what so-and-so said to me 3 years ago when I was dealing with XYZ company. I see what's going on, right? And it's like, whoa, hold on, right? How did this happen? Well, it just happened because we didn't do a good job asking some basic questions on the front end to understand them better, right? Great. Yeah.
No, that's very important information to have, especially on the commercial side, and really, from my end on the digital marketing side, understand who it is that you're marketing to. Your messaging on your website has to be consistent with that, right? You can't say that you're dealing in commercial loss and that's what you're doing, but your website says nothing about it. You have no social proof. You have no testimonials. You have no pictures of jobs that you've done on there. I mean, that's basic things that we see quite a bit, right? The head in the sand people that just check a box and say, hey, we're finished with this. We've got a website. My neighbor's uncle's friend's cousin built it for me and he's in IT. So it's fine. It's great. And are still struggling to figure out why the phone's not ringing. Or if they're trying to dip their toes into the commercial side, they're trying to figure out, why can't we close any of these jobs? We're showing up at this insurance agency's office all the time with sandwiches and lunch, and we're taking people out and nobody's picking up the phone. In fact, they're kicking me out of their office nowadays. And I know another thing that you guys spoke about about was just that. I know, Chris, you come from that insurance side, so you had a lot of insight on it. And Brandon, you had a lot of really great things. I think it was the last time we were on together, where it came through the, we're talking about the article one of you wrote with the candies and smiles isn't working anymore, right? To try to help increase your conversions and sales. Call centers, right? Not having the infrastructure in there to facilitate calls is probably pretty important. You want to make sure that you're being able to pick up the phone. You're a lot of the things that you guys explained was you're making sure that you're walking the walk if you're talking the talk. And a lot of this stuff that we're talking to, the genesis boils down to, and the way it combines is not having proper systems in place, right? Whether that's educating your own internal teams or having just the systems to answer the phones properly, right? So what happens when our receptionist is out of the office? And I'll share another funny backstory about receptionists not being in the office. Well, most of our clients in the restoration world that we're doing digital marketing for are in the business of offering emergency 24/7 service, right? So phone needs to be picked up at all hours, no matter what. And what a lot of people have defaulted to do is transferring that to their cell phones on a Saturday or Sunday. And some young gentlemen that or ladies that might like to go out on a Friday night or a Saturday morning, getting a phone call at 4 while they're still out. It may not be conducive to closing a job, right? And that's affecting my bottom line as a marketer because, hey, we're sending these leads there. We've got your visibility on point, but they're not into club music most of the time, especially a residential loss if their house is on fire or just recently suffered a loss. And also answering the phone in a grouchy, kind of hungover way probably isn't going to be conducive to closing a deal either. But we're seeing a lot of the same thing when it comes to having somebody answer the phone. So outside of not having structure set up or any systems in place, we're seeing a lot of people just not trained in even anything that the company does. Yeah. And not only, we were seeing that with call centers. So a lot of people are defaulting just, let me spend a couple $100 a month. Somebody's going to answer the phone all week, but they're not providing the proper training to that call center to kind of train them to be able to understand what their processes are in the business. That's right. Are you guys seeing a lot of that on your side? And I know you mentioned the partner.
Yeah. I think that's what drove us to try to find a partner, honestly. I think at the end of the day, we see these themes, these consistent problems. We obviously pull our own Rolodex from experience and go, wow, this created heartburn for us all the time. But then what we're kind of constantly doing is looking for those folks that are specializing in our industry, serving our particular client, because it is different. It's unique in a lot of different ways. Sometimes I think we definitely blow that out of proportion, but it is true. We're very nuanced. And so, and I don't want to make this a pitch about Answer Force specifically, but the reason that we are investing time and energy with them and learning more about their service offering and providing insights and direction for folks to check them out is that division that serves our industry is being engineered specifically for our industry. Our experience, what we need, what our clients are looking for when they call, how we can parallel our existing intake system. Is there a way for them to match that as closely as possible so that that experience is consistent? Because you're right, this is not a one size fits all. Just because a person answers that phone does not mean they're able to do anything of value to the person that is calling based on their current situation.
Right.
And so it is important. An answering service, they are not all equal. And you want someone that understands our business and what state our client is in when they call. Otherwise, it could be a massive failure. Massive failure.
Yeah, and we're seeing it quite a bit. We're typically looked at as a digital marketing agency, and pick one of my account managers, and they've probably been told that, we need you to, we're not getting calls. We're right at our end of our rope. We're going to lose the business. We've bought into a franchise now, and we weren't, the expectations weren't managed properly, and we're just losing, and we need you guys. And that, to me, I'm out there to say, if you're thinking about hiring a marketing agency or consulting when it comes to digital marketing, and you're in that situation, or you feel like this is the lifeline, you're not in a position to be hiring anybody to be doing anything when it comes to marketing. We aren't. There is no such thing as a magic bullet that we can do or a magic pill we can give your business if you can't withstand that. But it always boils down to not having these systems in place. If you don't have the systems in place to be able to generate revenue via the traditional marketing modalities, then you really need to take the action steps that are necessary, i.e. training your team, making sure the phone's being answered before you start trying to hire or outsource any of that stuff, because you can be number one on Google for every single keyword in your service area, Google Business Profile, Maps rankings, we'll kill it with LSA. We're going to kill it with Google Ads for you. But if somebody's not picking up the phone, or even better than that, one of the things that we require from our clients is having call tracking. So speaking of conversions, it's an easy way, a little tip for everybody that's listening, easy way to figure out and aggregate data is track your calls. You can, for $5 a month or less, you can have a separate phone number for every single thing you're doing for marketing. Every one of your guys' business cards can have a separate phone number on it. So there is no hiding from numbers. There is no client that we can have that can say, hey, our phone's not ringing, when we can provide a report of X amount of phone calls coming in with a recording to see how your team is answering the phone at 3 o'clock in the morning when they're out at the bar.
Yeah, right on.
I just want to touch on this because I think there's a best practice in here that maybe not exactly what I'm about to describe. Brandon and I had a chance to, this wasn't a client business, but we had a chance to explore a friend's business at 24/7, full service restorer. And, we were just kind of grilling him with questions, talking shop and whatnot. And one of the questions I asked him was about after hours call reception. I said, hey, how do you guys manage and adjudicate that whole process of on call and who does that? He said, well, we have an on-call rotation, and the way that they handle it is literally every single person on the team takes a turn at doing call. Like it's it's an integrated part of their business, is that we're a 24/7 company.
Yeah.
Everybody takes their turn essentially on the call roster. And I said, well, how do you guys manage when somebody doesn't answer their phone? They sleep through it. They're on a date. They find themselves in a place with no coverage.
Yeah.
And without even missing a beat.
Oh yeah, I remember that.
He said, if somebody misses a call, they're immediately suspended without pay for a week.
Wow.
If it happens a second time, they're terminated.
Oh.
We're a 24/7 service company. We can't miss the call.
Completely unapologetic.
Totally
I like that.
unapologetic. And then I think the follow-on question, I forget his exact answer, but I was like, oh my goodness, how many times that happened? He's like, I think he said once or twice in 7 years. It doesn't take many times of somebody. I mean, the word travels fast in a company of almost any size. Somebody gets suspended without pay for a week because of their phone. Everybody knows about it. That person ain't going to make that mistake a second time, right? So and now some people may hear that and like, wow, that's extreme. Stuff happens. It's like, well, yeah, stuff does happen, but not if you plan well.
No,
right? Not if it's a fundamental part of your role. And I think we have to take it that seriously in this business. Now, whether you do that, right, or you find a partner that you can rely on, like an answer force, to do that after our call reception. But it is that serious. It is that serious.
It is. It really is. I mean, it's really could kill you. It is not an insignificant amount of money that costs to hire somebody like Ironclad Restoration Marketing to provide digital marketing services. And beyond that, the ad spends, depending on your service area, are astronomical. Astronomical.
Yeah.
I mean, it's crazy. And it's crazy the amount of money people are willing to lose instead of just implementing a simple trick like firing somebody that doesn't answer the phone.
Yep.
And I love it. I wish I could fire people for not answering the phones on other companies. That might be a good consulting service, kind of like a restaurant. What is the restaurant makeover? Or
makeover. Send me their name, email, and cell phone number. I'll do it.
Yeah. Show up at the bar at like 3 and wait for them to not answer the phone and fire them on the spot. I mean, that'd be fun to do, but it's crazy the amount of money people are willing. And not only that, the amount of head burying in the sand that goes on where, I can only speak from our perspective here as an agency side. They're willing to pull the plug on something that we've built for 6 or 7 months that they've hit their stride because they are not willing to look in the mirror and solidify their processes internally, whether it's answering the phone or providing a good service or asking for a Google review at the end of the day, or even meeting with our account managers. You have to be present in your business. I get it. Most of the people that started, I mean, I'm a tradesman myself, just a different industry. I'm really good at that industry. So sometimes you kind of, okay, go ahead and handle it. And you're going to defend your team to the max, and you've got a good operation. You're providing a good service. You're just got these marketing company that's up your butt trying to figure out why, you're not answering the phone during business hours. And it's something that we come across a lot.
Yeah. Well, this kind of speaks to a thing that we end up coaching a lot with our clients. In fact, it's kind of a fundamental part of what I think all of us have to figure out in our business is that nothing is accomplished or done in a silo in a restoration business. So
Right.
like we often have people come to us and like, hey, we want to grow our sales. It's like, okay, we can help you with that. And in order for you to successfully grow your sales over time, not just to create another sale, go get a single job, but to actually grow your sales and grow your scale, there's an equivalent investment required in your operations and systems and process and admin and job file coordinators and dialing in, coaching up your PMs to attain the service level required to win those customers. So there's
a team sport.
There's always this balance. You know, you might say the yin and yang of things is that you cannot just dump $100,000 into pay-per-click advertising without any consideration for your call intake, dispatch process, your collections process, and anything else. Because if you pump a bunch of new revenue and blood coming through your pipeline, but you haven't equipped your team with an equivalent investment so that they're ready to handle that business, convert that right into revenue, and then ultimately create happy customers, right? It's always that balancing act. And I think sometimes we forget about that. We're just like, man, we need to grow. Let's throw some money at a digital agency.
Yeah.
But we've done nothing to shore up what's the experience when that customer actually clicks the button.
Yep. What happens when they say yes?
Yeah.
Right. You muster up the strength to ask the lady on a date and she says yes. And you say, okay, well, see you later, you know, or Dumb and Dumber. Well, see you later.
That's right.
This is something that's, you know, I again, guys, the one thing I love about bringing you on is that I have an idea in my mind of kind of what certain little things here. And we end up going down this path together and really addressing some things that are just these pain points in people that we deal with on a daily basis in the restoration industry. But without getting too deep into this, I think a really cool parallel that I drew from what we've all been talking about this entire time and how my ADD mind works. And if I've explained it to anybody out there, if you guys want to look into my mind, it's like the old lottery balls that are bouncing around in the thing and like something will pop out every once in a while. It's like that perpetually for me. I just turned 40 and I've given up on fixing it. I just going to enjoy the ride. But one thing that I found really cool, and I just did an article for CNR and article R&R about this is just this sales or a solutions-based goal setting. A lot of times we'll have somebody say, hey, well, everybody that we pretty much talks to, they want to increase their sales, right? We don't usually have people paying us because they like me. They pay us because we're providing a service. But oftentimes I met with something along the lines of, well, we want to increase our sales. Well, do you have a plan on how to do that? You know, what are your operations like? And they're like, well, we don't know. We want to increase the sales. Well, how much? Well, we want to hit 5 million. Well, what's your plan internally to be able to facilitate these sales if we did that? And are you prepared to spend the money that it takes to increase from $2 million to $7 million year over year? Because it's going to be, you know, a significant amount of ad spend, and it's going to be a significant amount of time investment and patience on your end that's going to take this. So I think it's really cool that a lot of the things that we end up going back to just come back to this nucleus of having the processes, having clearly defined goals, but more so than the goals, you need a process and a why as to what you're trying to do with the goal. Without the why and without the system in place, you might as well walk outside and just scream that goal up into the air and save yourself a phone call and save yourself 6 or 7 months of marketing.
Right. You know, it's kind of funny. I think this is in this pocket that you're in right now, Ben. So here's something that I just suggest, like all of us, just take a few minutes to consider. One is, I think as restoration contractors, let's identify what our current closing and conversion rates are. So we're just going to talk through a series of numbers that I believe will allow you to create an actual strategy so that you can work towards something in a concrete manner. So I think first you need to understand what your average job size is for both EMS and your recon and whatever other service divisions that you are providing competently. I think we need to have a current real picture. It doesn't matter how bad or good it is, just know what the current picture is in the most concrete manner of what your closing and conversion rate is. Okay. Then I think when you're armed with those two variables, what you're going to do is you're going to look at your organization. You're going to establish a bit of a, if we're honest, a swag rev goal. Okay. Well, how much increase in revenue do you want to see? And there's a series of different factors that we're probably pulling to make that consideration. It could be like how few our revenue streams are in terms of the types of client that we're serving. It could be that we just feel like our market share is fairly small in this fishing pond, whatever. So if you know what your rev goal is, top line, if you know what your average job size is in your current divisions, and if you understand what your closing and conversion rates are, now you can make a determination of how many leads does your team need to be generating on a consistent basis in order for you to even come close to that target at the end of your fiscal year?
Right.
Right. So if we can at least start there, and even if you don't have the formula all hammered out, go to work trying to track, measure, and determine those 4 things. And you can, from that, create an actual sales strategy that then you can drive your team with. And what that means then is you convert that into a conversation on a weekly basis that talks about what we're doing in concrete ways against those goals. Meaning, are we creating the leads that we need to do? Are we increasing our closing and conversion rate to allow us to produce less leads and increase our revenue still? Right? There's just all these decisions and actions that you can take in your business once you truly identify those 4 things.
Well, and I would add 2 other things, because again, as we talk about, it's important to make sure that our operations team is ready. Like if we say we want to add 2 million to our top line this year, and we're going to leverage PPC, maybe hire another sales, or whatever the sales channels are that we want to develop to hit that, then we got to also address this thing. Are we ready? Like, can we do, like, if that business just starts flowing in today, another 200,000 a month, and can we handle it with our existing team? A couple metrics that you might think about. One, how do you know when we have enough technicians?
Oh,
this is a big question for a lot of teams, because you don't want to be bloated with technicians, because you don't want to be sitting on a whole bunch of payroll, have a light, like that's one of the difficult things in our business to judge. And one of the things that Brandon often teaches in class, like, how do you know when to hire? When you run a payroll report in QuickBooks and you're seeing that everybody on the team roughly is averaging 45 hours a week, 5 hours of time, right? And there's a lot of psychology around that too, right? You get somebody into 60, 70 hours, 30 plus hours overtime, taxes are going to eat up a lot of that extra pay, right? But that extra 5 hours, it's beer money.
Yeah, 5 to 10.
It's positive. It's 5 to 10 hours. That's a really great metric to tell us, okay, if we're consistently over a period of the last rolling 30 days, where our team's hitting at 45 hours, it's probably time for us to onboard another sales rep. Or, another technician. Likewise, with project management capacity, these are our 2 kind of big service delivery drivers on the service side. Generally speaking, with a blended full service restoration company, say, let's just call it 75% residential, 25% commercial.
Okay.
We want to see each PM managing about $1.5 million-ish in business amongst their files throughout the year, $1.5 million. So when you look at your team, these are very easy metrics, or should be relatively easy metrics to find. Where's my team at? And I can tell you right away, do we have excess capacity for growth right now on our team? Or as part of our sales strategy, do we need to proactively do maybe some pre-spending and preparation to get the team to a place where they can handle that growth? Is there anything you need to augment there? Or?
Yeah, I think, just for some clarity on that hourly piece, it's like when we start hovering in that 50 and beyond on a consistent basis, that is the red flag. It's starting to tell us, we're probably understaffed, but and because all of our guys, gals, they're wanting a little bit of OT to supplement that. Of course, there's a million other pay models that we could talk about too. But anyways, that is a good rule of thumb. And I think with that project management piece, of course, all of this is based on projections. Like, where is the team producing right now? And then we can say, okay, well, if we know that number ahead of schedule, we can proactively begin the recruiting process, knowing we can be selective.
Yeah.
That's the point, right? Like you don't hire a project manager when you need one. You begin prospecting for project managers ahead of the bell curve so that you can be choosy and selective. And by the time you say yes, it's a rad candidate that you're not going to have a 50, 60%, chance of exiting or pulling the ripcord out on the back end. Because you took your time. You weren't desperate. You weren't in a hurry. You knew you needed one in the near future, but you courted someone of value instead of making a desperate hire, right? So I would just add that layer.
Yeah, and I would imagine that, I know for a fact that if you did hire a project manager, even a sales guy, when you need them, when the fire is burning, you're setting them up for failure.
Big time.
You're probably not going to have the time to teach them your systems. You're not going to probably have the time to make sure they're a culture fit. You're probably not going to have the time to even vet them out to their capabilities. So what happens is all this hard work that you put into this, all the time you've invested in money and your teams that are there, you're going to have one or two bad jobs. And if you're dealing with commercial, you're done. I mean, you're going to have a hard time climbing out of that hole. So I think that is another thing that it can't be overstated, that and those are really great two topics about when to hire, because we get that. We get it. When we're talking, we're trying to consult and we're trying to work through problems. Those are some things that come up quite a bit, especially when we're talking about the goal setting, the initial onboarding and bringing a digital marketing client. And it's very important to us to understand what it is that they want to do and what they want to get out of it. And if they don't have the teams, if they don't have the people in place, then oftentimes we have to say, like, well, you're not ready for this yet. It's no different than a guy that's just starting out or a lady that's just starting out and wants to just go compete in the Dallas, Texas area and get water damage restoration leads from Google ads. Like, well, are you prepared to spend $5,000 a month for 5 or 6 months on ads to just break into the system? And most of the time, I don't know many entrepreneurs that'll have an extra $40,000 or $50,000 laying around that they can just throw away if it's just a 1 or 2 person operation and with one truck on the road.
Right. Well, and I think, just in general, I think what the opportunity for all of us, and listen, like, I hope nobody listens to anything that Chris and I ever talk about and get the impression that somehow we've landed and we've got all the shit figured out and we're just telling you what you have to do. It's more Chris and I sharing our experiences, because a lot of times we just fell on our face in all of these categories. It's how you get the battle scars, right? Yeah. But I would just say, like, if you were my strategic partner on digital marketing and I was able to come to you with those data points, right? What my rev goal is, what my conversion rates currently are, right? What I'm doing to create that. If I come to you and tell you what my average job sizes are, it's like you're now empowered at a much higher level to give me what I really need out of the partnership. And I think one of the things that we see so commonly is it's more of a, we're busy. We're in all these different categories and lanes as a key leader, and we want to hire a strategic partner and just have them do it all. And we forget that we have a fiduciary responsibility to help equip that partner to give us what we need. And so you're never not going to be responsible for your numbers. Like, that's just, there is no such thing. Right?
You can't. And again, the adage is what gets measured improves. And if you don't know your numbers, you're just blindly, shooting from the hip, and you're not going to get the results that you think you're going to get by doing that. I think that anytime you're going to partner with somebody, again, and why I'm so adamant about learning as much as you can, even with people out there in the restoration world, you're thinking about switching to a marketing agency or utilizing a marketing agency for the first time. Really take the time to educate yourself on what it is that you're buying. Right? What it is that you need, what the end result of this, because we're just a very small piece of the pie in your world, right? In the restoration world. And again, with constantly improving, I just had a really cool conversation with a very close friend of mine today. And one of the things that I mentioned to him, we're talking about self-improvement and working on our businesses, was there is no such thing as the top of the mountain. There is no such thing. You're in a perpetual climb forever. If you think you've gotten to the top, just look up, because there's always more room to grow. So I implore you to, if you're listening to this, check out Floodlight Group. Really listen to the Head, Hearts, and Boots podcast. You guys, I've like somebody I look up to. The wealth of information that you guys provide, you're giving it away. Like, it's exactly where culture wise, what I do here, why it's important to me to spend time talking to people like you, or spend time just talking to myself on here, explaining why you need to be doing what in your business to make sure that you grow, because it's coming from personal experiences. I'm able to come, luckily for the listeners out there and people that end up being clients of ours, we get to come at this from an agency's perspective to see what has caused failures and really look in the mirror about what we can do internally. And we're constantly meeting and fixing and trying to keep up with Google's algorithm updates and the trends in the industry. And much like you guys are doing, you're coming at this from real world experience and the client side. And owning a restoration company, So again, I thank you guys. I know we spent a lot of time today. A couple things I'd love to dive into if you guys will have me either on yours or mine, but I really would like to talk to you guys a little bit more about the hiring and specifically when to make those key hires. And if that's something anybody out there is listening to would be interested in listening to, go ahead and send us a comment, send us a message, reach out to Floodlight guys and tell me so we can reaffirm that we need to get out there. But I think it's a very important conversation to have because it ties so intimately into what we do as a digital marketing agency for you. We're just there to serve you and serve the leads up. But if you don't have the infrastructure, or you don't know when it is to put it in place, you're either going to waste a lot of money, or you're going to burn yourself out, or you're going to get a bad name for your business at the end of the day.
Agreed, dude. Yeah, be happy to have that combo. I think there's a ton of value there. Love it. Absolutely, man.
I've shared your websites for the podcast and Floodlight Group, floodlightgroup.com. I implore you guys, check these guys out, listen to their podcasts, watch their YouTube videos of when they've done their, I like to call them TED Talks. So it's just lack of better words. It's just funny for me when everybody's walking around. I've had the pleasure of sitting through a couple in person. It was awesome. I got a lot of information. It's actually, we've implemented here in our agency to help our clients out and specifically understanding who it is that you're doing business with. So, I thought it was really cool. We built a tree of conversion or closing, whatever we interchangeable words we want to use, but it boils down to understanding who your client is, right, guys? And then we need to drive traffic to that client, whether it's you're driving somewhere and knocking on a door, you're really understanding who it is that you want to do business with, and then you want to convert them into either extra business if you've just got one aspect of it, or from the digital marketing perspective, we're converting those leads into sales, and then we want to convert some more. But in between all of that, there's a lot of tracking and measuring and a constant optimization, just realizing that we're on this perpetual climb for our businesses and understanding that there is no top of the mountain.
Love it. Yeah. Just hold on to all of this with a loose grip. Don't allow your ego to get wrapped up in what you're currently doing, because it's going to need to change and evolve. So just get used to it.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah. The value's in your ability to evolve. It's not in what you're currently doing. Like, end of story.
Adapt or die, right? Is that what they say?
That's right.
That's right. Yeah.
It's funny, if I had a more of a tighter grip on anything, I have, like, I know you guys probably know this, but I'm on my third iteration of the same book because Google likes to update their algorithm. Like, as soon as I publish it, it's like, here we go. We're going to change Google My Business to Google Business Profile now. So anyways, guys, I really appreciate you coming on. Looks like you guys have popped off, but if you guys can
Apparently
hear me,
our camera went to sleep, I guess.
That's all right. I can still hear you. That's all that matters. Listen, gentlemen, Chris, Brandon, I really appreciate your time. I think that we've gotten a lot of really great insight on this episode, and I'm really looking forward to diving into the hiring process one of these days when we can jump on together. If you guys can watch this on YouTube, you can see the URLs for both their podcasts, which is awesome, and their website if you're in need of any kind of consulting, anything from top to bottom for your business. They mentioned having an answering service partner answer for us. That sounds really cool. And I'm looking forward to learning a little bit more about that, because it is a big problem that I see a lot of people that are using these answering services are having when we're tracking phone calls. Gentlemen, thanks again for joining me on the Restoration Rundown, man. We'll talk to you guys soon.
Thanks again, brother. Appreciate you, man.
See you.